One note about shoes. I got these Merrells for $5 at a thrift store. Backpacking doesn't have to be expensive if you're patient, if you're willing to shop at the right places. Anyway, I used to think waterproof shoes were awesome. Andrew Skurka changed my mind on that. And then real life experience reinforced the changing of my mind. So I'll just briefly explain why that is. So waterproof shoes are not as breathable as non-waterproof shoes. If they have Gore-Tex, then they are breathable. But saying something is breathable is like saying someone is alive. That person may be short or tall or fat or thin. And so that person's ability to do things varies. And so when an item is breathable, like Gore-Tex shoes, that's fine, but they are not as breathable as non-waterproof shoes, because non-waterproof shoes have tons of vents and mesh. So instead of thinking of it as waterproof and non-waterproof, think of it as waterproof and barely breathable, and non-waterproof and highly breathable. Okay, so that's breathability. Now, I do like waterproof shoes for day hikes when I think I'm going to get wet or muddy. I don't really like them anymore for backpacking. And the reason why is there are, let's say, four ways that your feet can get wet. The first is when you have to do a river crossing, and regardless of your shoes, the water goes up to your knees, and everybody's shoes get wet no matter what. In those conditions, the waterproof shoes will take much longer to dry out. So that's a downside for the waterproof. Then there's the type of like splishing and splashing around like this, where having a waterproof shoe might save you. And having a non-waterproof shoe won't. Here we are again. I keep running into these right when I'm trying to talk. So like in an environment like this, a waterproof shoe is nice to step down like this and not have to worry about it. But with careful trekking, which I'm not doing, you can normally stay dry on these things, especially if you have trekking poles. And again, on the big ones where you're totally underwater, it doesn't matter what you have anyway. So the next way is through sweat. So if you're hiking hard or hiking fast or whatever, and you're sweating, then your socks and feet are going to get wet from the inside out. And that is definitely where waterproof shoes are at a disadvantage, because they don't vent as well. And so they're good at keeping stuff out, but they're not good at getting what's in out. So non-waterproof shoes then are superior in that regard. And then the other way, there's kind of two ways. The other way is rain. So if it's raining and water is hitting your legs, basically your socks are going to get wet. It doesn't matter if you have waterproof shoes on. It doesn't matter if you have gaiters on. If the rain is hard enough, long enough, you really can't prevent the water running down your leg. Now, maybe if you have rain pants on, but the problem with that is if you're hiking in rain pants and a rain jacket, you're normally sweating profusely, because those things also don't really breathe. And so now you go back to having the problem where it's from the inside out. And then the last one, which is related to rain, but ever so slightly different, is wet foliage. So like it might have rained yesterday, and so there might not be anything coming down, but as you walk past all of these, all of these living things, leaves and everything, they will transfer wetness to your legs, and then you have the same dripping down effect that you have otherwise. So what I do is I wear non-waterproof breathable shoes, and I try to keep my feet dry, like not stepping into puddles, but river crossings are river crossings. If the weather is warmer, I'll just go through the river crossing like this and just live with wet feet, because honestly my feet are wet anyway from sweating. And wool socks do a pretty good job about wicking the moisture away and not exacerbating any skin issues. And honestly, having wet feet just doesn't bother me that much. The alternative, and this is what my friend Michael and I have done in colder weather, like mid-November when it's 30 degrees at night, is you bring a second pair of shoes. Now, that's not a great option because if you bring a good pair of hiking shoes, then they're going to be really heavy when they're wet after you've done your crossing, and then you don't want to put them in your bag, and so you got to tie them somewhere, and then you tie them to the outside of your pack, and because of the pendulum effect, they flip and flop, and they really throw you off balance, and they get caught on things. Now, you then can bring a different pair of shoes like Crocs, those hideous foam things that I own, and that works. They dry quickly. They're pretty light. You can use them at camp later. The only downside is they're not very good for hiking. And so one of two things is going to happen. The first thing is that while you're doing the river crossing, the lack of good grip from the Croc is going to make it more likely that you fall or twist an ankle. The second thing is, like on Jack's River Falls or on Jack's River Trail, you do a crossing like every 10 minutes sometimes. And so to sit down, especially if it's wet, especially if it's cold, to sit down and take the Crocs off, dry your feet, put socks on, put your hiking boots on, then hike, then stop again, then reverse the process, then put your boots somewhere while you cross. I mean, all of that becomes a major pain in the butt. And so what you end up doing, probably what we do, is you just hike in your Crocs for a mile or two or something like that until you get the river crossings out of the way. But again, Crocs are not that great to hike in. So yeah, those are kind of the dilemmas. Instead of Crocs last year, I did bring Tevas for the river crossing. They are slightly lighter than Crocs, and the grip and the fastening to your foot is much better. So that was a plus. But in general, I don't like Tevas. I like Chacos, and Chacos are way heavier than Crocs. So Chacos is another option, just heavy. All right, I'm gonna cross.